We are going to focus a lot on affordable housing solutions. My name is Davison, and I'm the immediate past international president of EAROPH, which stands for the Eastern Regional Organisation for Planning and Human Settlements. We're based across the Asia-Pacific region, and we're the peak body for the built and natural environment. And we foster the exchange of ideas and experiences across countries. I also work for the State Government of Victoria in Australia, and I'm based in Melbourne, and my professional background is as a strategic urban and regional planner. So look, the aim for today is to really talk about what affordable housing means for ASEAN countries. It's one of the priority areas of cities to ensure decent living standards for people. So throughout the forum, you're probably well aware that there are different thematic dialogues, and they offer the opportunity to discuss in a little bit more depth some of the main parts of the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanisation Strategy. And they help us to determine the priorities for cities as we move forward. So let's just talk a little bit about the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanisation Strategy. And you may be aware that this is a strategy for a framework that was launched in 2018 to provide ASEAN cities with assistance with the analysis of urban trends and priority areas for urban development in the region. It includes 2 toolkits for local government to help advance sustainable urbanisation in cities, and it includes a priority area identified as health and wellbeing. And I'm sure you would all agree with me today how important this particular topic is at the moment in these current times. So within that topic, there's a priority area called housing and home, and around the idea of creating and expanding on more affordable housing solutions. So what do we mean by affordable housing? As a planner myself, it's probably one of the most vexed issues that I've come across in my career in many shapes and forms. So what is affordable housing, and why is it an issue or such a wicked issue or problem that we face? And I want to distinguish this from housing affordability, which we would all agree is also an issue in our cities, with people needing to access, afford a home and the market and all of that. So look, when we talk about affordable housing rather than housing affordability, and this definition is going to vary between countries, we're really talking about defining dwellings that are adequate, and there's probably many measures of what we call adequate, in quality and in location, that don't cost too much, that enable the occupants to participate in civic life and access those basic needs and human rights. So one of the issues that all cities, and particularly in the ASEAN region, is facing is a shortage of affordable housing. And this has occurred through the rapid urbanisation of cities and population growth. So that's sort of compounding the issue. And what that does is it, increases the cost of housing, and it forces trade-offs to be made with expenditure on other basic needs such as food, healthcare, and schooling for children. So with limited access to housing, we see you'd be quite familiar with the creation of informal settlements in a number of cities. And often these settlements are put in very inappropriate places. And coupled with the effects of climate change that many cities are facing, such as flooding or coastal flooding and inundation, a lot of these places are at high risk, which can have an effect, on lives. So today's session is really about sharing some knowledge with you and increasing your awareness of the challenges and opportunities for ASEAN cities. As I mentioned in the beginning, we have a strong focus today on solutions, and I'm very pleased to let you know that we've got a number of experts with us in the field that are going to offer perspectives from different realms. So that's really the focus for today. So look, the agenda we have is quite an interesting agenda. We will have a city representative join us at some point in the discussion to give us an overview of the context of affordable housing solutions for the region. We will also have a panel discussion, and I'll be introducing a number of experts in a moment, where they'll be able to share their challenges and experiences and solutions from their area of expertise. And we will wrap up with some questions from the audience towards the end. So I'd now like to introduce our speakers. I'll start with our panel representatives. So today we have 3 experts who will be bringing their experiences to us live. I'd like to introduce Miss Bernadette Bolo Duthy, who is the National Director of Habitat for Humanity from Cambodia. Bernadette has a wealth of experience, has managed many multi-sector projects, particularly with community input. So we will go to panel in a moment with Bernadette. I will also would like to introduce Madam Mumtazah Mustajab, who's the co-chair of Housing and Urban Wellbeing Committee of the Malaysian Institute of Architects, who brings very much experience in the design of buildings in Kuala Lumpur. So we'll be very interested to hear from you. And I'd also like to introduce Pham, who's a senior lecturer in urban economics from the Vietnam German University, who I understand brings much much European experience, which will be very interesting to hear, and particularly from France. So that will be very interesting to hear from you. I think we have another speaker, City Representative, Mr. Aminuddin Buntar, who I think we're just in the moment connecting in, who's the acting chairman of Bandar Seri Begawan Municipal Department, who I mentioned earlier is going to provide us with a bit of information about different city contexts in terms of inclusive and equitable growth. And Mr. Buntar brings an incredible amount of experience in the public administration area in terms of a lot of public administration projects. So I'm just waiting to hear whether Mr. Buntar has joined us. But perhaps while we wait for Mr. Buntar, we might jump to some moderated discussion from our panel of experts. And for the panel, to let you know that you've got approximately 3 to 4 minutes, 5 minutes to answer some questions. And then then there's a couple of minutes if people want to ask a question of the panelist, and we'll direct that to them. So, look, we might start just one moment. We might start with Ms. Bolo Duthy. So just a question for you to just get ourselves going in this session today. So look, often local government lack a lot of financial and technical means to respond to housing demand, especially for vulnerable groups that struggle to access the private housing market. Is it possible for you to outline or tell us about some of the lessons that you have learnt along the way from your work in Cambodia and some of the solutions from the local government perspective? And how could these be adapted for this challenge of affordable and accessible housing? Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all our viewers in the gallery. Can you hear me? Thank you very much to the organizers of this thematic discussion on home and housing. I am Bernadette Bolo Duthy, Mekong Hub Director, and concurrently the National Director for Habitat for Humanity Cambodia. A little background on Habitat for Humanity. We are a global organization that's working in 70 countries, and we envision a world where everyone has a decent place to live. Because of systematic inequities and systemic bias in discussions, people experience inequities in multiple levels. Habitat seeks to support these people to thrive through housing by collaborating with people to understand the barriers in the housing ecosystem. As a stakeholder, we partner with people, private, public sector, and civil society to reduce inequities in the housing ecosystem. We put people and their capacities, vulnerabilities, voices, and influence at the center of our work. People thrive with dignity, security, and resilience. While housing is explicitly articulated in Target 11 of the Sustainable Development Goals, it is a key component that addresses across all of the goals. So investment in affordable housing will therefore have a profound and direct impact on at least 14 of the SDGs and health and well-being, as mentioned earlier. All right, so what have been our lessons in Cambodia? There are three significant lessons that came out of our 17 year of experience in working in Cambodia, specifically in making land and housing available in for informal sectors in secondary cities. So we're talking about secondary cities. Cambodia's secondary cities are Battambang and Siem. They all are undergoing rapid urban growth, and they face a severe lack of systematic development planning and financial resources for infrastructure like land and housing. So what are the three lessons we learned? One is enable. Make sure that the efforts that we do is supporting the enabling environment, the implementation and pilot of legal frameworks for land and property rights. In Cambodia, the government has enacted several land and property rights laws. However, they do not have the funding and the institutional framework to implement it. So what do? We identify these enacted laws, especially those that are not yet implemented for various reasons, like lack of institutional framework for complex environments like low income and informal settlements. We tap the resources and expertise of various stakeholders, government, communities, NGOs, donors, and technical organizations. In our case, the state provided land, NGOs provided technical and financial support to vulnerable and low income families to access to basic resilient homes. Organized communities coordinated and planned their voluntary move to the reblock land. And
Looks like we've just had some technical difficulties with Bernadette. So apologies for that. It is the world of virtual conferences, and I'm sure you're very familiar with that. We're just trying to get Bernadette back for a moment, but we might go back to Bernadette.
Sorry.
Great.
I think you lost me for a while.
Yeah,
How many minutes do I have?
You can keep going for a little while longer.
Right.
We'd like to hear more about your lessons. So back to you.
That's correct. So we're talking about the support the enabling environment, and I was talking about tapping the resources of various stakeholders, where the government provides the government provides land, NGOs provide technical and financial support to vulnerable and low income families, organized communities coordinate and plan their voluntary move to the reblocked land, and families with affordability self-finance and self-build their homes or access hybrid financing. Funding partners provided support to technical capacity building of government and civil society. Our lesson is that to operationalize projects, the technical working groups of the local government improves its capacity to transparently identify families that will benefit from the housing project. Second, also to equitably allocate land to the beneficiaries. In this way, the municipal technical working group also learned how to arbitrate conflicts and claims. As you know, situations like this would always require arbitration. This was exemplified in projects where we call strengthen civil society and government partnerships to deliver land tenure, which was supported by World Bank, AusAid and DFAT and other donors from the US um, and Canada. The second lesson that we learn is continuously educate ourselves, key partners to explore and discover together. I'm not saying we build the capacity of government. We learn together. We familiarize ourselves, the NGOs, government, and communities. Concept tenure, diversity of concepts of the continuum of land tenure, and not just focusing on land titles. We learn a lot that people tend to go for the land titles, but often it is not possible to learn together to explore that. The other thing that we need to learn and explore together is that we need to learn about the national housing policy that has been implemented by government or enacted by the government, and understand the principles and the guidance that are being embodied in that, like no forced evictions, no involuntary relocation, basic services to be provided when relocation is inevitable, clarifying community responsibilities. So explore alternative solutions to evictions, like identifying how can governments share land in an area that's highly contested, making roads smaller to allow families to build homes along the road, allowing communities to grow and thrive in those situations. And then the lessons learned from those experiences are embodied in a learning materials on the project that's in a multimedia form, video, printed materials to facilitate learning and replication. The third part is engage. How do you continuously engage communities? Communities are partners. If they have access to power, if they know data and information is power. So they regularly update the city maps of informal settlements. Battambang is one of the city in Cambodia that has a master plan. So the communities participate in updating the community profile, understanding the risks and the hazards in them. The other project that we look at is urban resilience and urban upgrading. So we provide them training on how they can identify hazards, provide funding so that they can identify, prioritize the hazards that are in it. What are the example of hazards? Flood, providing drainage, micro infrastructure in the community so that they can improve their health, reduce waterborne diseases. Also provide safe spaces for girls and women. They would provide dark spaces with solar lights. I think those are some of the lessons that we learned in our building up communities, resilient communities, through our participatory approach for safe shelter awareness. And I think I'm running out of time. I'll wrap up. I would just say again that investing in affordable housing is investing in almost all of the SDGs. Thank you very much, Mia.
Thanks so much for your insights, and I think it's thrown us right into this very important topic, and I think you've really shown how important it is to recognise that not all communities are the same, and this will be a challenge that will vary in various shapes and sizes for whatever project you might be involved in. But yeah, those tips that you provide on the lessons, we will take those into account through the remainder of this session. Look, I'm very excited to now let you know that our city representative, Mr. Aminuddin Buntar, who is the acting chairman of Bandar Seri Bengawan Municipal Department, has been able to join us now, who will be able to tell us a little bit more about what's happening with the efforts at the city level to be able to address this issue of inclusive and equitable growth. We understand you have a vast experience in the public administration sector, so I personally would be very interested to hear what you have to say. So yeah, please go ahead with your presentation, and we'll have a discussion with the rest of the experts following your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, moderator, and apology for the technical problem. I'll be very brief because I think we are almost 10:30 now, 30 minutes left with the presentations. So let me start first. The next slide, please. Next slide, please. next, please. Siapa main slide dulu kan? Can we move to the next slide? Ada? Okay. Right. Can we move to the slide number 3, please? I think we have some technical problem. Um, Kecil screen-nya dan
You can see the slide Bandar Seri Banggawan Kampong on the screen, Mr. Buntar. Is that the slide you're after that's live at the moment? You can go ahead with your presentation.
Yeah. Sorry, can we move to the slide number 3, please?
I think we're on slide number 3.
Yeah. Well, just yeah. Right. Just to show you where the Bandar Seri Begawan is and where the project is actually in the slide number 3. Well, the project is actually on the Brunei River side. So when we can imagine the challenges that building housing on a river actually. Yeah. This is where the location of the project actually that I'm going to describe. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. So can you move to the next slide?
There's a slight delay, I think, in the slides, but we can
It's
see.
On the, yeah, it's on the Bandar Seri Begawan Development Master Plan. Yeah, right. Thank you. Just to share that this is the 3 guiding principles when we are implementing our Bandar Seri Begawan Development Plan. Actually, the first is livable city, celebrating ecology and heritage. And second is Brunei identity, anchored in Malay Muslim monarchy. And third is sustainable and diversified economic progress. So based on these 3 principles, the revitalization project aims to deliver a beautiful, healthy riverfront city with a diverse economy and strong sense of Brunei identity. Next slide, please. Okay. Yeah. Next slide, please. Right. Okay. This is the 5 action areas that identified under Bandar Safeguard Development Master Plan. The one that I mentioned, this project is under Kampung Air action areas, which one? The one in orange color, yeah. Moving next to the next slide, please. Yeah, are we moving? Right. Thank you. This is next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. The survey slide. Yeah. Right. Okay. This is the result of survey conducted by Brunei Mall District Office, which indicated that 76%, which is 1,203 families, indicated intention of staying in the Kampung Air. So a big number of family. Next slide. This is where just to share what we have existing government facilities in Kampung Air. So if you can see mosque, fire station, police station, primary school, and even a health center as well. And next slide. This is just to share the current situation of the Kampung Air with hygiene and safety issues such as water pollution, all wiring, all houses which is built close to each other. So it's a kind of a safety issue as well. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. As been shown in the previous slide, okay, most of the houses are over 50 years old, and some of which have a structural problem and easily collapse. So it's a lacking of urban planning as well, and in its early stage of development, not controlled, and houses are close together and face a high risk of fire. And in terms of safety, the existing infrastructure like bridge and jetties, there are no or lack of railing and even an inadequate maintenance. Relocation is one of the key challenges as well. This project requires to move current residents to temporary housing, which of course require funding and also providing suitable housing. And as for students, challenges of relocating students into the nearest schools. Next slide. Okay. This project actually we look at opportunity to rebrand the Kampung Air itself into a modern Kampung Air with new facility at the same time maintaining its tradition. And this is in line with our Bandar Seri Begawan Development Master Plan, as I mentioned earlier. This project also is an opportunity to improve the hygiene standard, especially in the river, by introducing technologies that can curb direct discharge of water waste. And also, we look at this project as a further improvement of a living standard of the resident, which they can participate in the tourism industry, and as well as in the established commercial area to be introduced in the project. Next, please. Right. Again, implementation. Yeah, the implementation of this project is divided into 2 phases. The first phase, which is already completed in July 2012, which deliver a total of 65 houses at the heart of the Kampung Air. I'll share with you a picture. Next slide. Some of the houses which is already completed with improved surrounding and facilities. So you can compare with the picture I showed before with the first phase of revitalization. Next slide. Which is currently proposed consists of 157 houses. which include the provision of facilities with smart technologies. A pre-development work was already initiated, such as a structural integrity test and resident sensors. Next. I show you the construction sites where the project is. The one in purple is the second phase, and the one in white is the first phase. Right. Yeah. The next slide, please. The next 3 slides will show you the house plan and the design for the second phase. Next slide, please. Right. Next slide. And next slide are challenges. Right. Of course, with this new initiative, it comes with many challenges actually, and this project is no exception. The key challenges to this project is funding. I think some of the forum participants already mentioned about the funding. This project is yet to receive approval for funding under the 11th National Development Plan, and also the issue of sustainability of such funding. And also the project involve multi-stakeholders, and collaboration is quite a challenge as well. Right. Next slide, please. So as a way forward to overcome those challenges, first to look into alternative fundings with the possibility of involvement of private sector through public and private partnership. Second is incorporating smart technologies into development of houses and facilities as enable us to address the challenges identified earlier. And third, continued dialogue and engagement with various stakeholders to make sure that a successful implementation of this project. I think, moderator, with that I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. It was really pleasing to hear of the variety of opportunities that you have been exploring for that particular area. Now I think we will have some further panel discussion, and if we have time, we'll come back and perhaps have a little bit more conversation about the area that you shared with us. And I'm sure perhaps your slides can be made available to those that are interested. So I'd now like to perhaps ask a question of Madam Mumtazah Mustajab, who is the co-chair of Housing and Urban Wellbeing Committee from the Malaysian Institute of Architects. Thank you for joining us today. So look, we're very interested in ensuring the adequate quality of life to residents. And as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm sure there's many definitions of what we mean by adequate, but really to create those lively neighbourhoods and to be able to integrate housing projects into the existing urban fabric. And, you know, that sometimes requires a wider urban plan. And it's sometimes about ensuring that there's this connection between what you're producing and the economic and commercial activities and the services that people might need to access. So it is somewhat related to location and amenity. That's another expression we often use. So can you please share from your experience some examples of projects where you found that the cities have been quite successful in achieving that sort of integration? It is actually something that is tangible. It's not a general idea. It's something that we can actually achieve. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mia. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Architect Mumtazah. I'm from the Malaysian Institute of Architects. Assalamualaikum. A very good morning, or very good afternoon, wherever you are. Right. I think first thing first that we would like to know when we start doing a planning for housing is the 4 basic human needs, which is food, water, air, and shelter. If any one of these is not available to us, we will not survive. So hence, when we do integrated housing, So again, let's look at the definition, which is it refers to the strategy of blending or incorporating all the supportive elements for the housing units that includes these 4 basic needs. So within the development, and also to provide affordable housing at the same time, and looking at the rates and economic aspects. Now, as architect and urban designer myself, in Malaysia, it is actually a requirement. It is actually a must. When we do an urban housing development, it is a must for us to provide the retail and the commercial aspects of the development, say the offices, the shops, the stores, the markets. It is very, very important. And the other one is for education. It has to be accessible to schools, be it the primary schools, the kindies, or the high schools. And an added feature would be universities, if the land is big enough. And also important that it is accessible to the spiritual aspects, being in Malaysia, and also in Brunei, that the center of the community is actually the spiritual portion of it, which is either the mosque or the temples, the suraus, all the gathering places for spiritual activities. And it is also another aspect that is important is the social gathering aspects. So this is where we have the community gathering at the field or the green spaces, the parks, the community halls, all related to the community activities. This is a must. Other than the infrastructure aspect, that we must provide water supply, electricity supply, telecommunication, gas if it's needed. But most of the time in Southeast Asia, unless you are in high-rise urban development, you have your own gas tank that you buy from the shops and have it delivered to your homes. In high-rise development, they have a gas pipeline that can just tap at the kitchen. So water supply as one of the basic needs for human being. Electricity is extremely important. Once you get a breakdown, I will not be able to talk to you now. So food is very, very important as well. It has to be within a certain walking distance. Hence, the guideline in an integrated housing development is that you should be able to access to the food supply within 5-minute walking distance, approximately about 450, 500 meter distance. In the tropical country in Southeast Asia, anything that is more than 5-minute walk is unbearable. So if you want people to move within the housing area a lot longer and further, it is also important to provide shades like trees or covered walkways so that you can have more and more people on the ground to move instead of using the vehicles. So that's on how important it is. So with all this, when you can reach to your food within 5 minutes, it's very easy, and you can actually mingle at the same time with your neighbors, and that makes the whole urban housing community even happier. During pandemic, it's even more so. You can feel it, that because during pandemic time, you're not allowed to go out of your house, or you can only allow within a certain meter radius within the housing development. So it is very important of that 5-minute walking distance to the nearest sundry shop to get your fish, to get your vegetables for your food. And water supply is constantly being provided. Thank God, water supply is constantly provided, and that is important. And in terms of the differences on the income for the housing, and it is a requirement, for example, in Malaysia, it is a requirement that every housing development must be able to provide for a low income, medium income, and high income. High income is option, but it's a must to provide a medium income housing area within a bigger master plan. in Malaysia, I have to say one of the best cities, one of the best examples that that has done very well is actually Shah Alam, which surprisingly yesterday's event, there was a from the Shah Alam municipal department actually gave a talk, and I know they had Shah Alam is one of the first government plan development where everything is truly integrated, and it is from a much bigger land area, and it has subdivided into a smaller scale and even much smaller scale. And within a housing area of about, say, 300 acres of a site, it has its own little clusters, and each cluster has its own mix of low cost, medium cost, and high cost development. So we all live in harmony together, and with adequate distancing towards the food supply, the water supply, and working and schooling all within the area. So actually, literally, you don't need to go beyond 10 kilometers from your home in order to survive. I would also like to comment on the Brunei government for being able to revitalize the Kampung Air. I have been there, and I find it really an incredible story, an incredible place, and they're really working hard to integrate the housing development within the Kampung Air. And I also noticed that relationship also with the commercial aspects, the educational aspects, the link from the house to the school, from the house to the shops, from the house to working area, and that is very important. You don't need to drive so far, one hour away to work, or 1 hour away to go to school, or 1 hour away to buy fish, for example. So let me stop that, and we'll continue on the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your contributions. And I think, you know, even from my own personal experience going through this pandemic, it's really opened my eyes to what's in my local neighbourhood, and this long thought idea of everything having to be centralised, with everybody living a long distance from their workplace and other things, I think has really come to the fore. And, you know, I can really see people connecting with nature in my neighbourhood, and can see how that benefits well, really everyone. And we need to, as practitioners, find ways to not segregate the society in any way, and allow everybody to have equitable access to that and those services. So, really interesting to hear your insights, and also to build on the example from Brunei. I think that was really good. So we might jump now. Now, just to let everybody know, we do apologise for starting this session a few minutes later than we anticipated. We know there's another session that starts at 2:15, but we will run just slightly over 2 o'clock, if that's okay with everybody, just to give you a little bit more benefit from our session. So look, we might jump now to hear from Dr. Pham Tyson, because, you know, I'm very interested to hear about your technical expertise and what you can share for local government across the ASEAN in terms of what are some of that sort of, you know, capacity building and training initiatives that might improve this concept of implementing, you know, a lot of these affordable housing solutions. If you'd like to share some of your insights, and then we might open up to some live Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mia, for the introduction and for the question. Good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps good evening, everyone. My name is Pham Davison, and I'm working at the senior lecturer of a Sustainable Urban Development Study Program at Vietnamese University. And housing is one of the main field of interest of my research, and also practical activity as well. Besides working mainly as a senior lecturer at Vietnamese University, I'm also collaborating with UN Habitat for the Global Future City Program as a strategic advisor, local strategic advisor for the 2 urban projects in Ho Chi Minh City. And it's one my pleasure that I contribute a little bit for the ASUS project by being in charge of the city diagnostic report for Sapa city in Vietnam. Regarding the question, regarding have the capacity building need and the knowledge required for the local government in ASEAN. From my experience of working with the provincial and city level housing development program with some municipality in Vietnam, especially, and also from my research and literature review on other country, I see that there's some key point that we should address and equip the local city authority staff. The first topic that we should equip and transfer to the authority staff should be integrated planning mindset and skill. Because we all know that from the presentation and sharing from the two previous colleagues from Cambodia and Malaysia, we see that affordable housing is not only to build a house, right? It's not only the engineering task, but it also to think about the relevant infrastructure and services, and also other related function and activity to ensure the overall livable environment for the citizen, in this case for the vulnerable group, right? So in this case, we should have an integration mindset and integrated planning approach, not only building the house, but think everything in a whole and towards something livable and sustainable in the long-term vision. And so I think that is the first point. The second point is that some years ago I joined and I developed a course regarding housing market and land market for the city authority staff in Vietnam, a project by World Bank. And I see that when I see the feedback from the city authority joining the course, I think that there's a lack of the understanding on the mechanism and the how the housing market works, or how the real estate market works. Because at least in Vietnam, as far as I know, up to very recent time, we can see that we only have a top-down approach policy. The authority from a central level up to the local level just issue the policy, thinking that it might work, but without the good understanding on how the supply and the demand side of the market work, and how the two sides interact with each other, and what can be the key influencing factor to the performance and the activity of the supply and the demand side. And if we only have a top-down approach, I think that it will not follow the market mechanism, right? The market principle, and it can be harmful at the end of the day to all involved party, including the investor and especially the buyer, the more vulnerable group in the market, the housing user, the end housing user. So I think that equip have the good understanding on the housing market, how the market work should be critical as well. The third point that I want to raise that the city authority should be equipped and to have a good and reasonable understanding on informal housing development, and how to regulate and to renovate the informal community. Because across ASEAN and other developing countries, we can observe still there's a lot of informal housing development. But the understanding is from most of the city authorities seem to be a one-way understanding. And they, in many cases, just simply think that, okay, we try to replace this informal segment by new development, a better new development, but without on the ground understanding on how the community were established, how the informal housing work. And I think it again is not working, because we should have a better understanding on the ground, on the community, in order to improve or to issue any type of activity or policy. So equipping knowledge and skill to work with informal community in the informal housing segment development should be critical as well. The last but not least point that I want to raise regarding the understanding on housing finance. Typically, as a beginning, I say that, okay, affordable housing in the understanding of many local authorities that should design the housing and build the house, right? Yes, project can be designed and design can be made, but who, at the end of the day, who will pay for the project? Who will finance for the project? And actually, the financial aspect of the project do not receive much attention from the local authority, and that's why when they have some kind of initiative or project, the project at the end of the day does not work, because they do not think from the beginning what is the resource to develop the how affordable housing, and housing finance should be very critical, right? So for example, from my exchange and discussion with some staff in the Department of Construction, the department in charge of affordable housing development in Ho Chi Minh City, most of them have a construction or civil engineering background or infrastructure background, and they know mostly nothing or very little about finance. And I think that we should deliver and equip them the knowledge on financial aspect of the project as well, and some other thing, micro housing credit or some other necessary knowledge and skill. So briefly, I want to conclude by listing again the 4 points that I think that important for capacity building for local government. Integrated planning, the first one. Second one, will housing market and how it works. Informal housing development and how we can work with the informal community. And the last but not least, housing finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your insights from your experience there. I think that nicely added to what we've been hearing so far today, and particularly interested in your comments around, well, really knowledge is king, isn't it? So you need people, working in this area really need to understand things from other people's perspective in terms of how the market works. There needs to be a lot of planning that happens in sorting out the finance for projects, and being able to engage with the different people with the various backgrounds for projects. We are running out of time a little bit, so maybe just one last question to coming back to our example from Brunei, Mr. Buntar. If we can just very briefly have this as a last question, listening to everybody who have contributed on the call or on the virtual conference, shall we say, today, what do you think are some of the technical and strategic areas for local government that might need further development and training to improve implementation of affordable housing?
Thank you.
From your experience.
Yeah, thank you. I think areas like urban planning, design and development as well, or even the community economics development, because simple community at the end of the day will be a sustainable sort of development. So in the community, I think this community economic development is one of the key areas as well. And also urban heritage planning. So what we see is the Kampung Ari is we call it a city on the water. It's been there since many centuries ago. So we would like to keep the heritage, as one of the landmark for Brunei. I think urban heritage planning is important as well, and also it will create a tourism industry in that sense. So to name a few, I think that's the area that things that can improve further on this implementation of the housing project. So thank you.
That's very nice one.
Thank you for that. Look, I think we have run out of time to continue this session, but I suggest that if people in the audience have particular questions, we can follow up some way after this session. I'm sure there'll be a way to do that. So look, I wanted to say a big thank you to all our speakers today. It's been a good session to hear from the different cities in ASEAN and hear from the different perspectives. So I want to say thank you to Mr. Buntar, who provided us with our example from Brunei for the Kampung Air project. That seemed very interesting and a lot of lessons to be learned from there. I'd also like to thank Ms. Bernadette Bolo from the National Director of Habitat for Humanity for your insights around really evolving the community in these projects from your examples in Cambodia. And also a thank you to Madam Mustajab from Malaysia Institute of Planners, Architects, for your insights around community development and integration, and a lot of lessons learnt there. And lastly, thank you to Mr. Pham Tyson from Urban Economics in Vietnam, and your experiences that you have provided. So look, it has been a lot that has been shared this afternoon. I've been taking a few notes of some interesting points that have come up. Probably one of the things that I would say, even in my own experience and just listening to you, whilst we are sharing these ideas here this afternoon, we all know that context is everything. And for any project, any goal that we might have in terms of trying to create more affordable housing, we do really need to make that fit for purpose within the locality, within your city, within your neighbourhood. And to do that, you do really need to understand your market system. You need to understand what it takes to make a project happen. You need to do a lot of work in the beginning to be able to access finance and get people enabled, and that includes the community. You need to find the champions for your projects, and we've got one comment that wants to be made.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. I think what Brunei did, incorporating the heritage and the cultural aspects in the housing development should be commended, because a lot of time we forgot about it. We forgot our roots. And I find that really, really big thumbs up.
Yes.
Congratulations, Brunei.
Yes. And you did give the example around the spiritual centre of a community for your location, and why that's important in your context. And in other locations it might be something else that drives the community that's important. But yeah, can't underestimate the much needed planning that goes into this. And it's important also to consider that there are different sectors of the market, and we are really talking about this affordable housing market, which is different to housing affordability, where everybody's trying to compete to get into the market. So we do really need to, narrow the lens there on that particular issue. But look, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I think this is an incredibly important topic. It's a topic facing ASEAN cities. It's not immune to other places in the world as well, particularly as we have rapid population growth and compounded with the issue of climate change. So next up for the program today is a dialogue on education through digital skills and development. It's due to start in 5 minutes, so please go and get yourself a drink, have a quick break, and resume in 5 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.